Hey everyone, I'm Rick and thanks for joining me. Today we're looking at an amplifier, but before we get to it, I'd like to ask that if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button to help the channel grow. The amplifier that we're looking at today is the Douk Audio F5, and it's currently available on Amazon for $300. Before I get into the review, I'd like to share a little background on how I got this unit. If you do a search for F5 amplifier online, you might come across an amplifier that looks pretty similar, if not the same as the F5, but with different branding. One such company reached out to me a few months back and asked me if they can send me one of their units to keep in exchange for an honest review. And this is common. When I get something that's free, I just tell you and YouTube. That's when you see that paid advertisement banner up on the right hand corner. And I've never been asked by any of these manufacturers or vendors to say anything positive about their product in exchange for the product itself. Now, does this happen out there? I personally couldn't tell you. It hasn't happened to me. In this specific case, I had already asked Douk Audio for a review unit of their F5. And I told the other company, thank you, but I can't review your product right now. I already have a similar product. Well, after having the Douk Audio F5 for a few days, I fell in love with it and I sent an email over to Douk to ask if I can purchase this unit. Now, they did offer me a courtesy discount, which I did accept, and that's why you'll see the paid advertisement banner on this video. But again, Douk didn't ask me to say anything positive about this unit themselves. All that to say that I could have got one of these units at no charge from another vendor, but my brand loyalty stands with Douk. I really appreciate everything they pump out, and I appreciate their support of the channel. And I really like this amp. Now, that being said, while those other amps look very much like the F5 on the outside, I couldn't tell you if they're the same on the inside. So let's go ahead and start by taking a look at the F5. On the front of the unit, the first knob to the left is the power unit, and it's a simple switch on and off. And on the right, the volume knob, and feels really nice and smooth. On the top, we have the tubes, and in the center, we have a 6N1P handling the voltage amplification, and to either side, we have a pair of 6L6s handling the power amplification. The Douk Audio F5 is a 6 watts per channel max Class A integrated amplifier. Realistically, you'll be more in the 2 to 3 watt range before hitting heavy distortion. Over in the back, in the gray doghouse, we have a 150 watt power transformer and 15 watt output transformers under that. On the back, from the left, there's a button to select one of the two inputs, which are an RCA right next to it. One labeled CD, the other labeled aux. This is a single-ended only integrated amplifier with two inputs. Next to that, we have our speaker outputs with a tap for 8 ohms, a tap for 4, and the ground. Finally, the IEC inlet. And this unit is spec'd at 110 volts, but it does come in both 110 and 220, so be careful when you order it. Make sure you get the right voltage for your country. This one does not have a selectable 110-220 switch. The volume is controlled by a standard potentiometer, and it's not motorized, so you don't get a remote control with this unit. So how does it sound? In its stock form, it's just a beautiful sounding amplifier. Warm and full. The bass, while not super deep, has this thickness to it. The attack on kick drums, while not the most textured, has a very nice satisfying thump. Transients decay beautifully, and vocals are very holographic, with a ghostly lingering sustain and release. The soundstage is deep and wide, but the layering isn't great. Things do get kinda clumped together, but a beautiful sound nonetheless. With my 92 dB custom Joseph Crow speakers, I was getting an output of 75 to 85 decibels at my listening position with authority and impact. Over 90 decibels, things begin to get saturated and compressed. At lower volumes though, at around 60 decibels, it's just heaven. Did I mention that I really like this amp? So since I purchased this amp, I thought I'd give it a few upgrades and a few mods. Earlier in the year, PS Vane had released their Horizon series of tubes, and they had sent me a set of 12 AU7s to test. Well, I liked them enough to buy a pair of their 6L6s that set me back around $90. Changing the included 6L6 tube for the PS Vane 6L6 WGC AT gave me my first instant upgrade. Noticeably improved bass, clear vocals, a quieter background, and that layering that I said was clumped together earlier now gets some separation. But I wasn't done yet, so I decided to change the 6N1P tube. I had a PS Vane Horizon 12 AU7 AT tube as well, and although this is also a 9-pin tube, you can't use it in the same socket as a 6N1P. It's wired differently. You'll either have to rewire the amplifier or use an adapter, and that's what I did in this point. I went ahead and got an adapter from Amazon which rewires the tube to fit in the 6N1. And I picked this one up on Amazon for around $18. And another improvement. The clarity and detail didn't really change, or at least it wasn't very noticeable. But what you can notice is that the soundstage expands wider and deeper, and everything gets more holographic. More of what I consider that tube sound. Now the 12 AU7 has less gain, so I lost about 6 decibels of output. But it sounded beautiful, and I'd easily accept that reduced volume for that expanded soundstage. But then I remembered I had this Gold Lion 12AX7 tucked away. So I popped this one in next. Now the 12AX7 gave me a volume output that was much closer to the original 6N1P, but with that added sound stage. And I'll have a sound demo on a companion video posted as well. And this combination gave me a very addictive and romantic sound. So at this point I'm thinking I'm going to keep the Douk F5 as my day-to-day music amplifier. So can I improve it a little more? Sure, let's try. I made a few more basic mods. And I know these mods can sometimes be controversial. And I definitely don't intend to start a controversy. So this is just what I did and what I like. But the stock amp sounds wonderful as well. And please don't feel that these additional changes are necessary. Taking a look on the inside of the amplifier, you'll see a little brownish orange coupling cap. It's a 400 volt 0.22 microfarad mylar cap. And a warning, if you decide that you'd like to mod your F5, please do take it to a professional service technician or make sure you discharge the 450 volt capacitors in this unit before you start working on it. You could get a serious shock or worse. Anything over 50 volts is dangerous. I decided to replace those coupling capacitors with MyFlex aluminum foil paper and oil capacitors. I've used their copper foil paper and oil capacitors on my DIY Joseph Crow speakers as well as on my GR Research XLS Encores. And I know what those can do to the soundstage. So I decided to go with MyFlex again, but this time I thought I'd experiment with their aluminum foil. The MyFlex caps are quite a bit larger than the Mylar caps that they're replacing, so I had to mount these capacitors on the side of the unit and then I ran 16 gauge wires to the PCB. If you decide to try this mod, make sure you do get the 600 volt rated capacitors and not the 250 volt. I also decided that I'd like to use my own preamp with this amplifier, my Jongsun JA1, which is also modded with Burson V7 op amps and Audio Note Silver RCA inputs and outputs. So while I was in the F5, I went ahead and removed the PCB that holds the two RCAs as well as the selector switch. And I pulled this out of the chain. And I dropped in just one set of the Audio Note Silver RCAs, which I love the quality on. They have a little solder bucket and they're solder ground. Super solid with some nice weight to them. And I just went ahead and taped off the holes that I wasn't going to use. And maybe later on I'll find some plugs that I can put instead of the tape. So I soldered the wire directly onto the RCAs and then ran it through and bypassed the volume pot as well to make a direct connection onto the PCB. In effect, converting this integrated amplifier into a power amplifier. But I did leave the volume in place so I don't have a hole there, and it's just for looks. It doesn't do anything at this point. No signal is coming through that pot. So now all my sources will go to my Jongsun JA1 preamp, which will attenuate the signal fully analog with its resistor ladder and input that to the F5 power amp. That gives me the benefit of having more source inputs, as well as now I can control the volume with the Jongsun's remote control. As for the sound differences, the new coupling cap takes layering, detail, and clarity to the next level. It's like I'm updating my DAC one level up, and for just $55, and I think that's a great deal. Now removing the volume pot and using my analog preamp also gives the characteristics of that preamp, which again add clarity and give you a little bit punchier sound as compared to a fixed level output DAC sending the signal to the F5 and attenuating with the pot. As for the Audio Note RCAs at $25 a pair, while they might not make a sonic difference, I like the better build quality and knowing the signal path is more direct and not going through an additional switch. So that's it. I have to say I love this little amp. I highly recommend it to anybody interested in getting into tube gear, and at $300, I really do think it's a great value, and there's an upgrade path as well. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.